Hi, this is JFK researchers Rachel Elrod and Richard Hook, and we are research partners. We've been research partners now for nearly 5 years. We thought we would make a video together. I'm going to do a fireside chat with you, if that's okay, Richard, and just ask you some
right.
assassination basics. Because
Okay.
so many people now are asking us real basic questions about the assassination, and loads more younger people who don't know quite so much information are coming to our pages asking us really basic stuff. So I thought we'd just kind of go through some real some questions. Would you answer some questions, and then we can kind of
Yeah.
tidy some things up? Is that okay?
All right. That sounds good. Yeah.
The first question I want to ask you is how long have you been a JFK assassination researcher?
Well, probably. I mean, I was always interested ever since that day. When I was 7 years old, but I never really got around to it until about the last 15 years. I was a hardcore researcher for about 10 years, but a researcher for about 15. And then I really got into it for about 10 years as a hardcore JFK researcher, the last 10 years.
Right, and we've written some books together as well, haven't we? So,
Well, yeah, I was showing them when we started here. Those are our two, the Killer Queen and
Killer Queen.
Takedown.
Killer Queen, and Takedown, which was our first.
Right, and those are my two most recent
Yeah.
books on the
Yeah.
JFK assassination.
Yeah, so you can get those as a download from Amazon,
Yeah.
just straight down into your device if you want to read them rather than get the big fat paper copies. So go to Amazon if you want those, and get them because we would say that they're worth reading, but we've researched things that other researchers
I
haven't
put a
got
lot. I
to.
put a lot of effort into
Yeah.
those books with
Yeah.
an iPad or a computer or even an iPhone.
Yeah.
It reads very well. Those
Yeah.
books. There's a lot of information there.
Okay, right. Well, on with the questions then. So the first question, I have to put my glasses on because I can't read my own writing. Okay, number one: if Oswald didn't do it, the shooting, how do we know that for sure? How do we absolutely know Oswald didn't do it?
Well, we know for sure because he was photographed watching the assassination in the TSBD doorway downstairs, watching when President Kennedy was getting shot. And with computer technology, personal computers, I blew that photo up, the Altkin 6 photo, and identified 77 points on Oswald's face and shirt that matched pictures of him later that day when he was arrested at the Dallas police station. So it's beyond question that he was watching the assassination. He was not even upstairs when the shots rang out, like they've tried to say that he was. So we know he took no shots at all.
Okay, that's really huge because it means the implications of that are incredible, and it leads us on to other questions about who did do it. But we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, do you think Lee Harvey Oswald brought a weapon into the building that morning then? If he didn't do the shooting, did he actually bring a weapon? We've been told, the narrative is that he came into the building with a weapon under his arm and in a brown paper package. Do you think he did that?
Well, the debate's gone round and round. Fraser's made a ton of videos saying that he drove in with Oswald and the package was about 5 different sizes. But I mean, I don't believe, well, first of all, my position is that Oswald didn't even ride in with Fraser that morning. Okay. So he definitely didn't bring in any rifle. He wasn't even in the car with Fraser. And we have a sighting where Oswald was at Top 10 Records in Oak Cliff that morning at 7:30 and Fraser wasn't there. Oswald, in my opinion, drove in that final morning in the station wagon, provided a light green Nash Rambler station wagon provided by Ruth Payne that was going to be used as an assassination getaway vehicle. So Oswald drove in by himself. He wasn't with Fraser, so he obviously didn't bring in any rifle. I don't believe there was any package that final morning at all. Any guns that were used were already in the TSBD. They weren't brought in the last couple hours. You can believe that. And they certainly weren't a pile of rifle parts shaken around in some warehouse brown paper wrapping. It's complete bullshit.
Okay, next question. Did Lee Harvey Oswald kill Tippit, J.D. Tippit, at 10th and Patton that same afternoon?
Well, no, actually, Oswald wasn't even there. And one book that has helped, that has just come out, is by James Files, where he provides more information that Gary Marlowe is the one that shot Tippit at 10th and Patton. And he was a friend of James Files. And actually, he had a nickname. He was called the Raven. But they brought in the Raven to kill Tippit, and Tippit was used as his corpse was used as a double for JFK. They flew him back to the falsified autopsy at Bethesda. But the way that it was is Oswald wasn't even at 10th and Patton. They had tried to get him to go down there, but he didn't go. He went to the theater instead. And they sent Marlowe to 10th and Patton, and Gary Marlowe, he was the one walking along the street. He was taller than Oswald and thinner, and he was wearing a light jacket and an undershirt and khaki pants. And he's the one that fired the 3 shots over the hood of Tippit's police car. And then Tippit went down on the street, and then Roscoe White was there also to make sure that it happened. And he came around and shot Tippit, put a shot into Tippit to make sure he was dead in his right temple, to make sure Tippit was dead, because they had to take him out down to Parkland and get him stuffed in the casket with JFK as the duplicate corpse. So Gary Marlowe and Roscoe White are the ones that shot J.D. Tippit. It was for a corpse to falsify JFK's autopsy. I mean, that's why they hustled Tippit's body out of there before the police were even there. They first took him to Methodist, and then when the call came in that they were going to need the spare corpse for sure, they hustled him down to Parkland before Air Force 1 and 2 had left, so they could get Tippit packed on there also. But that's the way it was. Oswald was never at 10th and Patton.
Absolutely. And we can totally prove that, because in our books we have a picture of J.D. Tippit and JFK laid out together as dead corpses.
On Air Force 2.
On Air
right.
Force 2.
Right.
So we can totally 100% prove that if they came together as dead men, that they came together for a very, very specific reason, organised by the deep state. Nothing to do with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Absolutely. The bronze casket, the big show being loaded on Air Force 1, that was empty. And the corpses were on Air Force 2. They were worked on by a CIA body reconstruction guy to falsify the autopsy. His name was John Liggett.
Yeah. Okay, next question then.
Okay.
Did Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby know each other before the assassination? Before Ruby comes up and shoots him on the Sunday morning?
Oh, they definitely did. I mean, actually, Oswald knew Ruby ever since he was a teenager. And they met, I believe, at Carlos Marcello's Churchill Farms when Oswald was a teenager. He had met Ruby, so he knew him from years ago. And later he was seen in New Orleans by Judith Very Baker with Ruby. He's seen all over the place in Guy Bannister's office. Jada said that they knew that Ruby and Oswald knew each other. Beverly Oliver has said the same thing. And actually Ruby, well, we'll get into this more later, but and we do in our books, but he was much more of a factor in the JFK assassination than's commonly known. I mean, he was involved with all the intelligence agencies, and not just a mafia guy, Jack Ruby. He managed the Patsy Oswald, and at the Holland Avenue Safe House oversaw the 6th floor hit team where Oswald was told to shoot at the president, and he bailed at the last minute and didn't do that, but they tried to get him to do it. So.
Sure. And we have a witness sighting that puts Ruby and Oswald together the night before, in the middle of the night before the assassination.
Right. They met at the Holland Avenue Safe House. And they were seen around the corner from there at the Lucas B&B having coffee by the waitress Mary Lawrence. But also Loy Factor said in his book that they showed up late that night at the Holland Avenue Safe House, Ruby with Oswald, where Loy Factor was there, Mac Wallace was there, Ruth Ann Martinez was there, and Danny Arce was there. And they were going over their plan for the 6th floor hit team. which is where the sniper's nest was, and Oswald was told to take a shot, but he bailed at the last minute. Wallace went to the other end of the floor by Factor and Martinez, where they shot on the west end of the floor, the opposite end from Oswald. So Oswald, nobody was there monitoring him. In the last few minutes, he bailed and went down in the doorway. That's what he did.
Okay. Who was Lee working for the CIA, and did he try to stop the assassination, actually?
Well, he definitely was working for the CIA. And actually, he was working for the CIA and also ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence. And actually, Office of Naval Intelligence didn't have this domestic restriction. So when you're in the United States, you could be ONI and do the same type stuff. ONI is from the, about 100 years older than the CIA. And the CIA is supposed to have only operated outside of the territory of the United States. So, I mean, Oswald, when he went to Russia as the fake defector, he was loaned to the CIA by ONI when he was over in Russia. And we believe that he was sent to Russia with information to bring down Gary Powers' U-2 spy plane. And I believe that's what Oswald was over there for. I mean, he gave them information that allowed them to take down that plane, and then Russia had our plane spying on them, and they canceled. The peace conference was canceled, and Oswald was behind that, working loaned to the CIA from ONI. And then they brought him back. He came back to the United States and wasn't even checked. They just let him come back in without any kind of debriefing or anything. So, I mean, if he had defected to Russia and was a genuine defector who hated the U.S. and did all these things like they said, they wouldn't have certainly let him smoothly come right back in.
Okay. How many shooters and how many bullets and how many teams do you think that there were?
Well, I mean, in our book, The Killer Queen, I do list that out. Here, so let me see if I have that here.
Page 75, I think you said.
Yeah, so where's this? A second here. Yeah, and I mean, this is as close as we can come to it, but I mean, basically, I mean, there were about 5 or 6 hit teams, and then the final hit team, which was inside the limousine, with William Greer, the driver, and Jackie Kennedy, was the final insurance hit team. But they had hit teams in the buildings behind, the County Records building, the Daltex building, the 6th floor of the TSBD. They had one in the pergola round behind Zapruder. They had guys in there, Jack Grimm, John Erst, Clyde Faust, Charles Harrelson was there, and Charles Frederick Rogers. Then, of course, behind the picket fence, they had Tippit and Roscoe White, the badge man shooter. And then a little bit further toward the underpass, they had James Files and Frank Sturgis. I believe it was probably James Files, but there was definitely a shooter there. Could have been Bernard Barker. He was back there too, but it was Files and Sturgis, the ones closest to the underpass. Files in his book goes into that more. And James Files, one footnote, he hasn't told us the whole truth on stuff. For one, he's tried to explain away the other guy that was with him as Edward Lansdale, the businessman. Now, we know that's not true because Edward Lansdale was a general. They certainly wouldn't have had a general back there managing a shooter behind the picket fence, behind Files. So that wasn't Lansdale. Files has tried to explain away the 2 sets of footprints in the dirt, which was no doubt him and Frank Sturgis. Sturgis was the spotter watching Files back. And then the rifle was run off in the opposite direction that Files says, and Ed Hoffman saw that from the freeway. Files is just ignored in his book, Ed Hoffman, completely. So Files has told us some truth, and actually he's given us a lot more truth in his book, most recent book, about Gary Marlowe and how he shot Tippit. And one interesting fact about that is that Files makes clear that Gary Marlowe knew Tippit from Florida. Okay, so he had met Tippit in Florida beforehand. So that explains why Tippit would have pulled up next to Marlowe walking along the street and reached over to roll down the side window to talk to him. He knew Gary Marlowe, and he obviously was talking to him. He said, well, I'm looking for Oswald. Have you seen him, or something like that? And then he got out of the car and Marlowe shot Tippit, but they knew each other. And that's an interesting fact.
Okay. Who were the three tramps and who sent them in? There's been a lot of confusion about who the three tramps actually were over the years. So,
yeah, well, one thing on the three tramps, I did a couple books with former disc asset and mafia associate Rod McKenzie, who knew the three tramps personally. And the tall tramp was Charles Harrelson. The older guy in the front that you see being marched off there was Charles Frederick Rogers, and the guy in the back with the hat was Chauncey Holt. But McKenzie knew all three of them personally, and so I'm completely confident the three tramps were Harrelson, Rogers, and Holt, and they were a hit team in my opinion. In the Nix film, with enhancements in my book I've shown where Harrelson was shooting by the pergola round, and you can see his head and hair matches the tall tramp. So Harrelson was a shooter. They were a hit team. Chauncey Holt was a radio man, and Frederick Rogers was a spotter, and he may also have taken a shot too. But that's who they were. Charles Frederick Rogers, the old guy, the tall guy, was Charles Harrelson. And then Chauncey Holt was the tramp with a hat, who, by the way, brought this fake Secret Service flip badges to the knoll that morning and passed them out, so they had phony Secret Service agents to turn people back when they initially charged up the knoll. And these fake flip badges were made at Holt's badge company in Los Angeles called Lasco. Chauncey Holt had a police badge company, and they were able to make these fake Secret Service flip badges, and he brought them to Dallas that day. Chauncey Holt, he had flown from Los Angeles. Okay. So he brought the flip badges. Chauncey Holt, the tramp with a hat.
Okay.
I don't know. Did I answer?
You did. Thank you.
I forgot what it was. Yeah.
One last question.
All
really.
right.
If Oswald is innocent of shooting anyone, and remember he said, I didn't shoot anyone, no sir. Remember that?
Right. That's right.
So if that's true, who ensured JFK was actually dead then? And dead by the underpass?
Right. Well, like I said, the hit teams, it came down to the final hit team. The final insurance hit team was inside the car. It was the Secret Service, William Greer, the driver. And actually, people don't know that, but JFK's real Secret Service driver supposedly died from a heart attack like 30 days before, Shipman, and they replaced him with William Greer, which obviously was more willing to carry out this assassination. But the final hit team that killed JFK was in the car. And what it was is they had passed the freeway sign and JFK was up, but he still hadn't been hit in the head like they wanted. So Greer looked back and knew he had to stop the car, and the hit team in the car had to finish him off. So Greer stopped the car. Kellerman next to him held the wheel while Greer turned around and shot up between him and Kellerman with a paralytic toxin pistol that hit JFK in the left temple, plugged him in the left temple, and froze him up with shellfish toxin. So Jackie could shoot him from underneath with a Derringer that was in her left hand inside the lamb chop hand puppet. They had concealed Jackie's Derringer pistol. But see, he was first frozen up there by Greer, who plugged him in the left temple with shellfish toxin. He was frozen up there, and Jackie shot upward through a hard target. So, and that was before James Files or the lower picket fence shooter even came in 314. If you look in 313, he hadn't been hit on the right side of the head at all where Files hit him yet. So Jackie's shot that went up through behind his left ear and took out a huge chunk that went up and landed by the manhole cover surely would have killed him. So Greer and Jackie would have killed him whether James Files shot at all or not. And none of this involved Oswald at all. He was a spectator. He was watching it all like everybody else. from the TSPD doorway. And he had tried to call in warnings. He called a warning that averted the Chicago attempt. They canceled the motorcade there a couple weeks before. He had sent memos from the FBI office and left him a note that got flushed down the toilet, but they weren't willing to take note of Oswald's warnings. And they went ahead. They had told Oswald to shoot. But as he told Judith Baker on the telephone that Wednesday,